Okay, we're going to start. This is from the Comptroller. The Controllers. Okay, I'm going to take the roll, and then I'll make a short opening statement, and then we'll get going here. Okay. Are we going to start with the pledge? Why not? Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, Mr. McKevitt? Here. Ms. Walker? Here. Ms. Birnbaum? Here. Okay, substituting for Mr. Drucker would be Ms. Bino? Here. And substituting for Mr. Lafazan would be Mr. Salage? Here. And I'm informed that Legislator Muscarella is on his way down. We have a quorum, so we can go ahead at this point. A little while earlier this month, the Comptroller held a press conference at which it was announced that $700,000 in taxpayer dollars had been sent by his office to a fraudulent entity. As we understand that we don't have a lot of details on this, this occurred sometime in late October of 2018. We basically don't know anything about it here, at least I don't, 2019, excuse me, thank you. It takes me a while to adjust to the year. By October or so, I should get it right. We basically know about it from Newsday. Mr. Schnirman, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your coming down here to enlighten us as to what happened and to answer our questions, because it's our job, it's your job to ensure that the Office of Comptroller has all the necessary procedures and controls in place so that tax dollars are not inadvertently sent to third parties that are not entitled to this money. Now, this was reported in the press as a cyber attack, but we've got a lot of questions, understandably. So what we want to do is find out what exactly went wrong over here in the process, which enabled this money to be sent to the wrong party. What procedures there were in place prior to this occurrence? What, if any, procedures have been implemented since then to prevent a recurrence? And we look forward to hearing the answers to these questions and more to protect the Nassau taxpayers' hard-earned money. Now, just a word as to the way we're going to conduct this hearing is, I believe, Mr. Schnirman, where are you? Why don't you come and sit in the hot seat right here, please? I believe Mr. Schnirman has an opening statement, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Okay. So Mr. Schnirman and whoever is with him will present the opening statement. At that point, the majority and minority members of the committee will ask questions. After that, we're going to allow other members of the legislature who are in attendance today but are not members of the committee. We're going to let them ask questions as well if they're so inclined. And finally, of course, since this is a hearing, we're going to allow questions and comments from the public. And with that, Mr. Schnirman, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Finance Committee of the Legislature for holding today's public hearing and for inviting us to speak on the financial and payment security and controls within the Office of the County Comptroller. I'm here today because modernization of the county's financial system is a concern that my office has proactively looked at since day one. A critical component of that issue is cybersecurity. As technology improves and advances at a rapid pace, malicious actors have weaponized that technology and are using it to attack governments, private industry, as well as private citizens. Increasingly, cyber attacks have targeted municipalities throughout the country, costing taxpayers and residents millions of dollars. A report released last fall said that in the previous 10 months, 140 local governments, police stations, and hospitals have been held hostage by ransomware attacks. Just recently, it was announced that a ransomware attack hit Albany International Airport. We've also seen this right here in Nassau County, with school districts targeted in Rockville Center, Lynbrook, and Mineola. As cyber attackers adapt, the threat only worsens. It's incumbent upon all of us to ensure that we undertake necessary and critical efforts to modernize our financial systems so that we can remain vigilant against the threat of cyber attacks and further protect taxpayer dollars. To be clear, the incident that was reported to the police was not a cyber attack on the county's overall IT infrastructure. This was a focused and elaborate phishing scheme that used a vendor's correct tax ID number, used a modified check to falsely change a vendor's bank information to divert funds. The claims for payment were normal and regular. In the scam we're here to discuss, the destination of the payments is what was fraudulently altered. In the end, all the monies were recovered and the county's books are even. Recently, I joined Police Commissioner Pat Ryder to announce that there was an attempted cyber attack on Nassau County, as well as the full recovery of more than $700,000 in county funds that were initially diverted to bank accounts due to this elaborate but ultimately unsuccessful scam. Controls in place at the time, which have since been enhanced, identified this fraudulent activity, and the account that the money was diverted to was frozen. As a result of a coordinated investigation, which included the Financial Crimes Detectives Unit of the County Police Department, the Office of the County Treasurer, Nassau County District Attorney's Office, and the Nassau County Comptroller's Office, all monies were recovered. The cyber attackers were thwarted in their attempt to scam the county. The county lost no monies. The vendor received payment, and additional controls were put in place that will further deter similar future scams. Procedures in place and implemented by our office's claims division ensured that county funds are protected. The team in the claims division not only audited and approved over 65,000 claims to thousands of vendors in 2019, but increased oversight and efficiency in the process, saving taxpayer dollars. Since we took office in 2018, our claims division has identified several $1 million in erroneous or duplicative claims, ultimately saving the county money. An example of their success is in the catching of the American water bill that had increased from $45 per month to approximately $4,500. Gabe Marquise is here, our fiscal officer from the claims division, and we thank our division for their hard work. But let's all remember, no matter how vigilantly we prepare, vulnerability to cyber attacks is a problem. We've improved our controls. We did this before this incident. We've now improved our controls after this incident. But even as our defenses increase, attackers will continue to attempt to work around them. And so we know we must continue to work to improve, because even where we are all vigilant, we are all still vulnerable. So let's get right into it. Deputy Comptroller and Chief Counsel Jeff Schoen and Fiscal Officer Gabe Marquise are prepared to give an account of the attempted scam, as well as the protocols that have since been implemented to further protect county funds against future attempts. To give a brief overview, our team implemented new controls when we first came into office because there was no consistent method to verify vendor information. We looked thoughtfully and updated the controls to make the process more centralized, more efficient, and increase oversight. A number of changes were implemented from January of 18 to August of 19. This is a result of identifying the importance of accurate vendor information in the digital age, and we'll look to continue to make updates as we go. To update the vendor information form, we required enhanced verification, including a canceled check and verifying tax ID numbers. Since this incident, we have enhanced controls further. These now include an enhanced vendor information form, enhanced verification and confirmation of vendor information provided. Internal Comptroller's Office trainings are now ongoing and have been ongoing. There's also been a countywide IT training on how to identify phishing attempts. And looking forward, the electronic vendor portal adds additional comprehensive levels of security by requiring a login and a password to submit a vendor information form. And today, I am pleased to announce that these new controls have stopped at least one subsequent attempt in which a real vendor was targeted in the same way using a mimicked email address. In December of 2019, a claims auditor received a request to change banking information for a vendor. Due to the new internal controls, the request was flagged. The scammer was unable to provide the newly required enhanced verification and vendor information. In working with the vendor, the scam was identified and the fraud was stopped by the Vendor Claims Division of the Comptroller's Office. I'm going to turn it over for a moment to Deputy Comptroller and Chief Counsel Jeff Schoen to walk us through PowerPoint with the specifics.
So as to the specific phishing attempt, the Comptroller's Office received an email from a scammer disguised as a county vendor requesting to modify the vendor's automatic bank payment information, or ACH payment. The scammer sent the request from an email address which mimicked that of an actual email address of the principal of one of the county vendors. For example, the actual email address being jprincipal@abcincorporated.com, but instead mimicked that with a .net. And as we all know, scammers are mimicking email addresses all the time. We all receive them on our phones and on our devices on a daily basis. The fiscal officer informed the scammer that they must complete a new vendor profile form.
Good afternoon. So as a process of the controls, we asked the scammer to fill out a new vendor information form, which was returned completed with the correct tax identification number, the correct vendor name, the correct vendor contact name, which was an authorized principal of the company, the correct vendor address, and the correct vendor phone number. In addition, a canceled check, a voided check, was submitted, as you can see on this slide, that had the accurate vendor name, the accurate vendor address, and an actual bank account number at Chase Bank was submitted. Those two documents were submitted in conjunction and then forwarded on for processing.
So this was a mimicked real check. Subsequently, the Comptroller's Office was informed that a bank account receiving county payments had been frozen. This indicated possible fraudulent activity. The Comptroller's Office identified $710,000 plus in payments to this account. The Comptroller's Office initiated a joint investigation with the Nassau County Police Department, the County Treasurer, and the District Attorney's Office, and all payments were recovered. So how do we get here? Before a vendor can be paid, a vendor must submit a payment information form to the county. This is typically done on an IRS form W-9, what's called a Request for Taxpayer Identification and Certification. The county's W-9 form is known as a 700 form. Prior to January 1, 2018, there was no centralization of the process of collecting this form. There was no consistent method to collect or verify the vendor information. And most importantly, the Comptroller's Office was not verifying that the tax identification numbers, the TIN numbers, the business's social security number essentially, was not verifying that those were in fact actual TIN numbers. Between January 2018 and August 2019, our office centralized the collection of vendor information in the Comptroller's Office. We centralized and uniformed the method of verification of vendor information in the Comptroller's Office through the Vendor's Claims Division. This included the verification of the banking account information, requiring the void check, or requiring a letter from the bank saying that this is in fact the vendor's bank account. And utilizing a free service that the IRS provided, verifying that the TIN numbers, the Social Security numbers of the vendors, were in fact actual numbers. And if that failed, we would essentially deactivate the vendor and not allow the financial systems to make any payments to the vendor until those problems were resolved. After the event, the phishing event, we enhanced the vendor information form. We required the vendor to tell us if they were submitting a new form or they were making changes to the form, and specifically to check what changes they were making to that form. More importantly, we asked them to provide their old banking information, both the bank, the routing number, and the account number, and the new one. Because if you were attempting to mimic as if you were an old vendor and you were in fact someone phishing and trying to defraud us, most likely you would not know the old information. You would only know the new information. We also put in enhanced verification and confirmation of the vendor information. Are you actually making this change? Asking multiple checks with the vendor, more than one person at the vendor, contacting more than one person. One person asked to make the change, another person verifying the change. And we also did training at the Comptroller's office, as well as the countywide training that IT implemented. On top of all that, very soon, we will be requiring the vendor information form to be submitted through the vendor portal. The vendor portal, as we all know, requires login and password access from the vendor in order to access it. So if you're a vendor who wants to submit a form, you're going to have to be an authorized user of the vendor's profile in order to get in. So we're another, on top of all these extra controls we put in place, there will now be a login and access controls in order to submit the vendor information form through the vendor portal. And as the controller pointed out, these internal additional controls have already thwarted a similar attempt.
So simply put, this scam was about using a mimicked email address on the vendor information form. Currently, our antiquated financial system, which was developed prior to the regular use of corporate or personal email addresses, cannot accept email address information in the vendor profile screens. A new financial system will be able to electronically verify email addresses and therefore will be able to identify a situation with a mimicked email address. And this underscores the need for modernizing the county's finances that we've talked about before. And for that reason, I again thank the legislature for supporting the financial modernizations that are now moving forward. The announcement of the phishing attempt was held with law enforcement following the full recovery of the diverted funds, so as not to interfere with an active investigation and in the interest of providing full transparency and accountability to the public. As Commissioner Ryder said, money moves quickly, and this scheme was not exclusive to Nassau County. In fact, 3 to 4 other municipalities were also targeted, we are told. We needed to recover the money before the scammers could be alerted and move the money. But the key thing is that working with investigators, we recovered the county's money and $0 were lost. All efforts to be transparent have served as a positive. Since the announcement, representatives from other municipalities, even from other parts of the country, have reached out in the interest of preventing similar schemes from occurring in the areas that they represent. And this healthy dialogue must continue. Just this morning, I joined Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone to discuss partnering on cybersecurity on a regional basis. But this is not a Nassau problem or even a regional problem. This is a challenge that all governments, municipalities, businesses, and private citizens face as we are more dependent on technology to manage our day-to-day life. So we look forward to working together. I want to thank again the legislature for again supporting the financial modernizations that are moving forward. Nassau County must take the lead in modernizing our government and ensuring that we're fully prepared to protect tax dollars now and into the future, no matter the threat. We're looking to partner with other municipalities on cyber initiatives as we go forward. In fact, months before this incident, the Comptroller's office proactively took up the issue of cybersecurity with its revitalized independent audit advisory committee. The issue was discussed actually in April of 19. In June of 19, a specialist from the county's external auditor gave a detailed presentation on cybersecurity. And in September of 19, the committee once again received an update on the issue. In fact, this year technology was built into our recent procurement of external auditors. As a sign of our concern for cybersecurity, our new external auditors have dedicated personnel for the integration of technology assessment services, which includes cybersecurity. These auditors have already met with the county's IT department to discuss this critical issue. So before we take any questions that you have, I want to again thank the committee for taking a thoughtful approach to this issue and sincerely hope that we can partner on initiatives to promote good government that protect taxpayers, the county, and critical modernizations as we go forward. I will caution that while we have gotten into quite a bit of information about the incident here, as our counsel will remind me, I'm sure, we are reticent to get into a certain level of granular detail, as that would be unsafe, I would say, to our public safety going forward. And with that, we're happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you for your presentation. I just want to know for the record that Legislator Muscarella joined us at the outset of this presentation, and he's now with us and in full attendance. Let me ask you a few questions. I'm not quite clear on several details on the actual attack here. We'll call it an attack for convenience. First of all, how many payments were made comprising this entire $710,000?
So I just want to give you a general answer, and then I'll let Deputy Controller Schoen give you. So as I said earlier, this was, and I can see how this could be a point of confusion. This was not an attack on the county's overall IT infrastructure, right? It was a phishing scheme.
We understand that. I'm not really don't want to get hung up on terminology at this point. I called it an attack. We can call it whatever you'd like. What would you like?
Absolutely an attack. It's just that there's a different piece, right? Whether it's the overall IT infrastructure or this was
I said during this attack.
Very good.
I did not refer to the IT infrastructure at all. I merely referred to this incident as an attack, and I'll continue to if that works for you.
Sure, of course.
All right. How many payments were there?
So the information we provided, that I provided in the presentation, is what we're comfortable to say publicly.
Yeah.
In the interest of public safety, I would be happy to give you any more details.
Were there more than one? Was there more than one?
After being notified that the payments were going into a fraudulent account, we identified other payments that going to that account. That's the $710,000 is a composite of multiple payments.
Understood. Thank you. That does answer the question. Now, how did this come to light? We kind of did not really get into a good level of detail. You didn't get into a good level of detail. How did you find out that this is a problem?
We were notified by our banking institution that the payments were attempting to go into a fraudulent account.
When did this happen?
The notification was in late October.
Notification was late October. And when were the payments being made? More or less? Again,
that's a level of detail we're not prepared to give outside of executive session.
All right, but is it safe to say that it was some months prior to that?
It was a less than 30-day period of time.
I understand. Okay. So now I'd like to go into some of the, all right, let me ask you this. Did you notify the administration?
We immediately notified and put together the investigative team of the Treasurer's Office and the Police Department, which are under the administration's purview.
Did you notify the County Executive's Office back in October or thereabouts?
As I said, we're working with the police department and the treasurer's office, which are under the county executive.
So no, you didn't notify the county executive. That's a no.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. Okay. Now,
Yes, we did.
oh yeah.
Yes, we were in contact with the county executive's office at that time.
So that's what I asked you. Okay, it would have really been simple to just say yes or no. Okay. And getting into the procedures, you've gone through a lot of these procedures as to how information is provided to the county, and you've got it all in writing, and you've got all kinds of information there. Are you aware that that there are certain best practices common to the industry? When I say industry, I should say to industry in general, not the industry. I don't mean only to counties, but pertaining to anyone that gets involved in making large wire or electronic transactions. And it's out there on the internet. You can find dozens of instances of it very simply. You're aware of that, are you not?
Yes, we've tried to implement a lot of practices that weren't in place, including the requirement of the canceled check, the requirement of the bank letter, and now the additional verifications, the dual verifications of an individual requesting a change and then verifying with the company that the change is in fact being made.
Now, are you aware that a change in payment instructions is a classic red flag? Are you not?
We receive hundreds of requests to change payment instructions. We receive both new vendors and vendors that already exist with us to make changes. We get about 30 or so requests per week, over 1,500 requests per year.
And your procedure in dealing with that is to change the paperwork, essentially. In other words, to provide. You've gone through these.
Well, currently the financial system requires us to do it on paper. We are going to be shortly going to the vendor portal, which it will be submitted electronically with the enhanced control of the login and password in order to do that.
It seems to me that using not only the prior controls but even the current controls, a disgruntled insider is still in a perfect position to game this system. He's got a disgruntled insider. He or she would have access to all the information you need.
Well, I think that would be the case in any institution, but I believe that if we get into more detail in executive session, we would be able to explain to you
I'm not asking. I'm talking
the additional controls we put in place.
I'm speaking quite generally speaking. It seems to me that these particular controls could easily be gamed by any. As I say, disgruntled insider. So let me ask you, are you not aware that the best practice for change of any kind of wire instructions from those given at the very outset of a transaction generally require verification by a phone call emanating from the payor to a known person and a known phone number at the payee?
That's exactly what we're doing now. That's one of the enhanced controls that I would like
you
to talk to you about in
mention
executive session, so as not to inform the people scamming us as to what our processes are.
No. You see, but that's not a big secret. As I say, that is a universal best practice. Doing that is a universal best practice. So we weren't doing that.
We were not, and we are now.
We are now. Okay. And are all emails encrypted? I don't mean.
You have to ask the IT. I don't know. That'd be an IT question.
It's an IT question. It sure is an IT question, but it's also a question for you because that's something that again, it's a best practice when you're dealing with any kind of transaction details. I'm not an IT person, but I know that I'm in business, and if I need something, I'll go to IT and I say, hey, best practices, here's the list. Have you implemented it? And if you haven't, you better do it for us real quick. Did you ever ask them for that? Have you got I'm sorry, did you answer?
Well, us at the Claims Division, we rely on IT to provide that level of security. The truth of the matter is that it's a largely manual process, and any time you have a manual process, risk is inherent.
So you haven't? The answer is no, not yet. Okay.
I'm not sure at what point, or we could certainly look into it, but right now the financial system does not even take an email address or cannot take an email address, so the email addresses are used merely at the Claims Division to communicate with vendors. And the vendor information form will be coming through the vendor portal, which requires an email, login, and password access. But we can certainly look into
going into some other best practices. When you make payments, how is that handled? Explain that to us, please.
Well, the Controller's Office actually doesn't make payments. The Controller's Office approves payments, and then all those approved payments are put on what we call a warrant, which is sent to the Treasurer's Office. And the Treasurer's Office actually makes payments.
Okay, so then there's no one...
That's the control in place. The Controller's Office, in fact, can't make payments. That's the major control in place in the county charter. Treasurer pays, Controller approves.
Okay, good. So that actually... And is there just one person for doing those approvals?
We have various levels of approval depending on the amount of the payment, but all of the individuals in our Claims Division have approval level depending on the level of the claim.
But it's a single person in each instance?
There are multiple claims auditors who can approve payments. Depending on the amount of the payment, there may be additional levels of approval required.
So in a given instance, if it was a significant amount of money, there would be more than one person looking at this?
Yes, even before it comes to our office, it would have been reviewed by the department and then sent to us for approval.
All right. Now, the other question, I guess you probably won't know the answer to that, but when somebody does get into the system, do you require multi-factor authentication? It sounds to me like that's something that you're starting to do.
Yes, with the vendor portal, I believe IT would be able to answer that more specifically.
Okay, but it sounds to me like that's something you're starting to implement but haven't yet. But we'll save that for IT, I guess, if they're going to be here. Now, tell us about the training programs that you've implemented here.
Well, apart from the countywide IT training, which we all received, I believe, to the phishing incident, we've been monitoring other incidents in other that happen, and regularly advising our claims auditors what to look for based upon those incidents. And Gabe, I could you
I'm talking about specifically the people in the Comptroller's office who are responsible for authorizing payments, and we've already established, I think, that you're about or have just about implemented a program where you would be calling to verify transactions.
We have implemented that since October, since the incident. We put that in place.
And what happens? Which kind of payments will you require phone calls for? Would it be for all payments?
So yes, it's for all. So what happens is the payments are separate from the payment process. So a vendor receives payments based upon a claim that's been approved. The vendor sets their profile up before they could get any payments using the vendor information form. That form is where they set up the payments, how they're going to get paid. If they want to make any changes, they use the vendor information form to make changes. So the initial form and any changes to that form, we are doing that dual verification. So one person from the vendor will request the change, then we will verify with someone else at the vendor, preferably the contact person on the contract, will verify by phone that they are in fact making the change. And then we have an additional control, which we send them an email like we all get when we make changes to our accounts that says, hey, you've made a change to your account. If this didn't happen, please let us know.
Yeah, please let us know. It's not sufficient. You've got to have these phone calls.
Yes, absolutely. We've been doing them.
It's old tech, but...
It is.
But
it's amazing how the new tech requires the old tech.
And fax machines. Fax machines are back in use for wire instructions. I would advise you not to take wire instructions on email at all. Not only not to verify it, don't take them. Get it by fax or get it verbally. It's a best practice. Unless sometimes, I mean, a backup would be a encrypted email, but you probably don't have that. What kind of information? You implemented some time ago your open checkbook program?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Now, question that I have for you is how much information is available as a result of this program that can be used by some of these evildoers?
So we implemented, we have a transparency portal, opennassau.nassaucountiny.gov. On there is open checkbook, open budget, open payroll, our scorecard as well, looking at the county's finances. So simply put, the information that is there is the same information that was previously publicly available, but it's displayed in a more user-friendly fashion. Previously, it was put up in just Excel sheets that were sort of hard for the average individual to wade through.
But is any of this information that's that might have made it easier in this particular instance and possibly others?
The information was already available.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
You wanna-
All the information is just a different. The platform we're using is a different platform, but all the information was already available.
It's already
publicly
available.
It was already made publicly available, and would be completely have to be made available under the New York State FOIA laws.
All right. Well, not information about checks and so forth.
Yes,
Information about checks.
you can check with your counsel, but I believe that all.
No, I'm not
information would be
contradicting you. I just, all right. Now, your office found out about this because you were notified by a bank that happened to notice irregular activity in this particular account to which the money went. I think that's what you said, right?
Correct. We all rely upon our financial institutions to help protect fraudulent activity on our credit cards and our banking.
Now, this is very unusual and lucky because the great majority of time, as I understand it, this money is within minutes is out of the country. So I'm sorry, this was a crook who didn't know his or her business very well, I guess. So it's really just pure dumb luck that we got this money back because of that.
I think the fact that we acted as quickly as we did once we were informed, the fact that we keep electronic records, so we were able to identify the accounts as quickly as we did, and the fact that the police department was
it
able
happens
to,
within minutes, literally minutes. It usually happens. Money goes into an account, it's gone within minutes.
I think they're able to move it from the initial
Seconds
account to
even.
different accounts, but it's very hard to get the money then out of those accounts. It takes a more sophisticated process to actually get the money in your hands. And this investigation was as was announced, was able to identify other accounts that it went to.
No,
freeze those
I
accounts, get
understand,
the money back.
but typically, as I say, money comes in, you have pre-existing instructions, and that money comes into an account, and it's immediately wired to Bulgaria or God knows where.
Then you have to
and
get
then
the
it's
money.
gone.
Then you have to get the money out of that account in some way, and that takes some sophistication.
No, it's wired to Bulgaria or something, as I say, or I picked on Bulgaria, I don't know why. But
The police commissioner went into this at some length, and I know that there are representatives in the police department who can probably speak to that as well.
all right. Now, we found out only because this was caught by the bank. Now, there is some delay in between the time that an invoice is rendered and payment is made. That's typical. There's a delay of, I don't know whether it's 30 or 60 or 90 days. I don't know what that is, and that's not really my question. My question is, what assurances do we have that there's not a couple of other time bombs sitting in your file that we don't know about it yet?
After the incident, we reviewed the 6 months worth of vendor information request changes and verified all the changes.
So you're satisfied that there is nothing else out there at the moment?
To the best of our knowledge, yes. But as I mentioned earlier, and I think it's important to remember, we will continue to update our controls, just as others are in other places, and yet we're all still going to be vulnerable. And so just as scammers will continue to improve, we have to continue to improve, and that's what we're committed to doing.
Well, you're hereby requested to give the committee members, and if it's in confidential form, that's okay too. But we'd like a full current exposition of what all your current controls are. And you might as well identify those that have been updated as a result of this incident, and even perhaps as a result of this discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Legislator Muscarella, and then Legislator McKevitt.
Hi, I'm kind of ignorant of this stuff. I'm not a computer guy. I know how to use one, so I'm not into all the terminology, and I'm not into all the sophistication. But let me ask you a couple of just basic things. You indicated the phishing attempt, and that the scammer got the following information: the correct tax ID number, vendor name, contract name, address, and phone number. Any idea where they got this information?
No.
Okay. So there was a phishing expedition by the scammer. Did somebody do a forensic evaluation of your computer as to where this information might have come from?
I think you may be getting into details of the investigation that the police department could tell you about.
Okay, so let me ask you. Basically, the computers are being looked at, correct? As part of the investigation now. I mean,
yeah, the manner in which they perpetrated the phishing scheme is being investigated, and it's part of how they were able to identify, from my understanding, how they were able to identify the bank accounts.
okay, because let me give you my basic concern. That this was less a phishing scheme and more a fraud perpetrated on the county. And I'd like to know in executive session maybe whether or not the information that was acquired by the scammer was general information that was gotten very easily by a member of the public, or was gotten as part of the electronic phishing scheme, number one. Because if it was general information that's out there, then that information should no longer be put out to the general public, because this information is being used by someone against us. Number two, I just find it incomprehensible that when someone asks us to change the direction of where money is going, that the Comptroller's office asks for a check for the new account and has never thought to ask for information verifying the old account. It appears to me that the Comptroller's office found out about this not because of any inquiry by the Comptroller's office, not by any hit that IT might have found that there was something going on with our computers, but solely fortuitously by a bank that notified us that we were being hacked or phished or whatever. And maybe this is unfair, but we constantly get audits by the Comptroller's office. Every department, everything, and invariably just about every department that the Comptroller's office does an audit on comes back with the common theme that you have inadequate safeguards. Inadequate safeguards for timekeeping, for paying bills, for accounts receivable, accounts payable, all kinds of inadequate safeguards. And yet it appears to me that we're the victim of our own inadequate safeguards in the county. And I understand all the controls that we're having from this point forward. Comptroller, you indicated that there were similar inquiries made from other places, that they're being subject to similar type scams. Were any of those successful that you know of? Or were they just...
To our knowledge, yes.
Okay. And just as a matter of course, I would hope that you're aware of the legislation that the legislature passed and went into effect that requires notification of the county legislature in the event you're subject to a hack or a phishing scheme or that kind of thing. And I just note that there was no such notification done here.
Just to that specific piece of legislation, it requires the county's IT department to notify the legislature and other people within 72 hours of a breach or cyber attack on the Nassau County's information technology infrastructure, so on the core infrastructure.
Okay, so what you're saying is it doesn't fall technically within the purview of that legislation, and in any event, it's not your responsibility to do it. It's IT's responsibility.
According to this piece of legislation.
Okay, so then so then perhaps we'll have to change the legislation.
And to be clear, and this is what we talked about at the beginning, this was not an attack on the overall county IT infrastructure. It was a different kind of situation.
Okay, I have no other questions right now.
You know, my understanding is that the way that this legislature found out about this incident, I believe it was a press conference that was held on January 11th of this year. Would that be correct, I believe?
I believe so.
Okay. And at that press conference, I believe you, Mr. Schnirman, indicated that was controls in place immediately identified this fraudulent activity, and the account that the money was diverted to was frozen. I believe that would be an accurate summarization of what you stated at that press conference. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. But the controls in place were not controls of the county comptroller's office. They were actually the controls of the bank where the money was being sent to. Isn't that the case?
No, actually, as our chief counsel had said, that is one of our controls. You want to speak to that? You can elaborate.
I mean, we rely upon the banking institutions that we all have to tell us when things are there's a fraudulent activity on the accounts that we are involved with them.
But as far as controls, I mean, is that a protocol on what type of suspicious activity to be looking for come from your office, or is that just something the banking institution does as general with all of their banking customers?
I think the answer to both those questions would be yes.
Yes, so this, you believe, is actually the protocol the bank has just for its institutions general, not necessarily something specific to Nassau County finance and accounts. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. And just a little bit of concern, too, is I know one initiative which has been happening in the last couple of years is the Open Checkbook website in order to be able to go and give more transparency to the public. My concern is I'm just actually on Open Checkbook right now, and literally I can see checks for as little as $4, literally see checks in greater amounts like that. And my concern is, yes, we definitely want to be transparent with the public how the money is being spent, but in other instances, can this just be a game plan to showing a suspected fraudster or scamster as to at least identifying who the vendors are so they can actually find this information and go down this route?
So I think we spoke to that earlier, but I'll let the council.
I think both this legislative body and other legislative bodies and the main legislative body in the state has unfortunately told us that, given us multiple instructions on how to put information out to the public and how to protect public information. The information that is out there is all information that will be required to be made public.
And I guess, again, that's part of the dilemma. Yes, we want to be transparent as possible, But, again, just by looking on this website, I can easily tell you, within a Google search within 30 seconds, I could tell you the names, the phone numbers, probably the CEO. Probably the only thing I could not easily get is a taxpayer identification number. That's the one I probably could not get as easily on this website at that point.
Yeah,
but again,
I think you're right. There are competing interests there, but I think the people of the state have required our legislatures to pass laws that require us to put information out there in a transparent way, and that's what we do. It's unfortunate that it could maybe be able to be utilized for nefarious purposes, but that's the line we're riding. We're trying to abide by the law and be as transparent as possible. We have competing statutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question. When you said the email address was mimicked, so perhaps at the end, instead of saying .com, it was .net. As soon as anything was different about that didn't draw attention. That didn't give you some thought in your mind that, wait, why is this different?
Well, without being specific in public about the actual change, the one step is that at the time the name of the individual was listed in Outlook rather than the actual address. But second is that up until a few months ago, the vendor portal, which is what we're using right now as the official record of vendors, did not exist. So we did not know what the official email address of the vendor was.
And the financial system currently cannot there's no place to put an email address into the vendor profile. In the financial system, it cannot take it. It doesn't understand what an email address is because of the age of the financial system.
Okay, and for the comptroller, when you started your statement, you said this was not a cyber attack. However, throughout part of your discussion, you called it a cyber attack. So it was, it wasn't. It was, I mean, to me, it's some type of cyber attack. I'm not too good on this either. I'm lucky that I can do everything that you're supposed to do on the computer. There's no way I could figure out how to do something that you shouldn't be doing.
No, I appreciate the question and the opportunity for clarification. So to be clear, it absolutely was a cyber attack. But what I was saying is it was not a cyber attack on the county's overall infrastructure, right? It was a specific targeted phishing scheme, not meant to infiltrate the overall cyber infrastructure of the county, but meant to phish a particular payment to get that. And hopefully that's a little clearer for you.
Generally, cyber attacks fall in these two categories, one being the phishing category and the other being the more attack on your infrastructure, ransomware type category. So this was more the phishing category, but they were both categories generally as cyber attacks.
Okay, so now when you were notified by the banking institution, did you try to do any investigation yourself, or did you immediately reach out to the police department and to the county executive and to the DA's office? And
so we immediately looked at our electronic records to see what the payments that were going to the account, and we identified the payments and then notified the police department, the county, and the treasurer, and began the investigation.
okay, I'll pass for now. Go ahead.
Thank you for clarifying a lot of what I don't think we had heard about before. But my question is regarding the amount of funds, in this case, approximately 710,000. If it had been a lesser amount, let's say a much smaller amount in total, do you think that the banking institute would still have noticed? Was it because of where the location of the account had been changed to, the distance, or was it the amount of the payments? What flagged it?
The account itself had already been flagged as a fraudulent account, so there was probably a lot of money in that going into that account. So it wouldn't have mattered whether we were trying to put a penny in there or whether we were trying to put multiple thousands of dollars in there.
Oh, so in other words, this scammer was using this account for other scams as well?
Yes, there were other municipalities on Long Island that were scammed in the same way.
By the same
Yes.
person, individual, whatever.
In addition, I would just add that in the more recent attempt that we mentioned earlier that was thwarted back in December, the amount of money at stake was a significantly smaller amount of money, and our enhanced controls now caught that.
And that's just based upon the amount of business we do with that vendor. It was less money involved.
Okay, so then leading up to what Legislator Coppell said, if it had been a more sophisticated scammer that wasn't doing an account across the country and was trying to transfer it to, let's say, another country, do you think that it might not have been flagged as easily?
I think you probably talk to law enforcement a little more about this. The Financial Crimes Division may know more about this, but essentially, the scammers like this, they attempt to get money into accounts that they have control over, and then move the money into other accounts they have control over. But getting the money out of the account is really the sophisticated part. It's somewhat easier to get it there, but you have to somehow get it out. You need resources, multiple resources, to take that money out. If you take money out in big amounts, it's going to be flagged. You need to, not to get into what the criminals do. I don't know myself, but you need multiple resources and a real system in place in order to actually get control of the money. You may have to actually get it out and utilize the money. And that never happened. In this case, that never happened.
So the account that it was going into, was that person even aware that what was happening?
To our knowledge, no. As Commissioner Rogers stated, it was a woman on the West Coast who didn't even know this account was being utilized.
Okay. And did the vendor notice that the payments were not being made on a timely basis? Had the vendor contacted us in any way?
the time period of the payments was really with less than our 30-day payment period, although sometimes our payments are more than 30 days, but it was certainly within our normal payment period, so they were not expecting those payments necessarily. They would have been shortly, but they weren't expecting them at the time.
Okay. And so now you're feeling fairly confident that with the portal set up, with the everything going through emails, it'll be...
Well, the portal is a ultimate layer of control, in fact, so you can't submit it unless you're a vendor who has access. But we still have all the other controls behind it, the phone calls that Legislator Coppell talked about, the verifications by phone call, and the other layers of protection that we've added in order to make sure that we don't make any changes until everything's completely verified.
Right. I would add, as we said, the good news here is that the county's made whole, the county's not out any money, and controls continue to improve. And as we talked about, the technology that we're using is improving, and we have planned improvements coming up as well. But I think we have to just be, really open about the fact that, so this was yesterday's scam, right? And as we talk about, moving forward, I think we have to anticipate that the sophistication will continue to improve, and so much must our efforts continue to improve, and and on we go.
So in a way, this was like a wake-up call. So it really got the county to start implementing procedures that should maybe have been in place. But I'm really glad that we're moving forward, and it'll be much more secure.
Since this administration got here, we were looking at the importance of these payments and how they are made, and looking at those enhanced controls that we started to put in place in January of 18 and progressed to where we are now. Starting with verifying the TIN numbers, which was never done, asking for the canceled check or the bank note, which is a common, as Legislator Coppell pointed out, is a common thing to do. We were not even doing that. And we centralized in our office, so the departments aren't verifying vendor information in different ways. We're verifying it all in our office, and we're allowing the vendors to submit the information directly to our office and doing the review in our office. We've taken ownership of it, and we continue to enhance the controls as electronics information gets more susceptible.
Okay, and just to go over one more time about Open Checkbook. So this site is simply organizing information that had already been available to the public on our website, but in a different format?
Yes, and I would argue that the public requires us to put out to them in a transparent way.
And is Open Checkbook actually what other municipalities use? Is it
Yes, there's a variety of them. There's also the town of North Hempstead has one. New York State. There's around the region in the country now. This is the direction that governments are going in terms of transparency.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. So, are you seeing any correlation between municipalities having these breaches and the efforts to make information more transparent? Because you're not seeing any correlation between the two.
I don't think that we have seen.
Because I'm hearing a lot more often than I'd like that a school district has been, in some way targeted, and then we're hearing that not only did we have one vendor, but you said later on there was a second vendor, there was an attempt. So I'm just wondering if you don't see any correlation. Maybe this is a question for law enforcement and not for your office, but
I think perhaps.
Yeah, I'll leave that question alone then.
But I would just mention that just locally, right, we've seen attacks in Rockville Center, in terms of school districts, Rockville Center, Lynbrook, Mineola on the school district side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, I'm aware. And that's what led me to ask the question. So you mentioned that you would manually now send an email to each entity, which you have said is somewhere around 30 entities per week, which is about 1,500 entities, vendors per year that are making changes to their account. So you're going to make the change using your newly established verification procedures, and then you're going to do what? Manually send them an email to say, we've made this change to your account. If you have not requested this change, please notify us?
Right, that's the only way to do it now. The financial system cannot handle the email, so there may be ways to automate it, but right now we are doing it manually. The individual who makes the change, who is already verified by phone or email with somebody else at the vendor, that they are in fact making the change, will then send an email as a sort of a final precaution to say, hey, we made this change. If you didn't authorize us, let us know.
Because a member of staff, senior staff, suggested, and then it made me think about how I'm communicated with by my bank and by others that I receive a wire. The U.S. Department of Housing, when they send the wire, they don't just rely on me waiting to get notification from my bank. They also send me a separate email that says, we've wired you X, Y, and Z dollar amounts for this purpose, for this program area, and it's broken down. And then there's a grand total as to what should have been wired into my account.
That would be very easy to do if we had a modern financial system.
So there's
we
no
could certainly
way
look into a process to do something like that with our current limitations.
to notify
When a
each
payment is
vendor
made.
that a payment had been made.
Right.
So you're saying right now there's no way to do that?
We could look into a possibility of doing it, but I can tell you for sure that it could be done when we modernize our financial system.
Okay. And where are we in modernizing our system?
So, first of all, thank you to the legislature on a bipartisan basis of appropriating funds to move that process forward. The HR system is looking forward to come online in the near future, and we are in the pre-implementation phase with the overall ERP system.
Okay. So can you be more specific?
Sure, you can elaborate.
We're currently in the process of reviewing proposals from a vendor who will provide pre-implementation services, and helping us to determine what should the exact services need to be provided for a new system, what the new system should look like, and what the RFP for the new system should look like.
Okay.
So we're looking for a vendor to assist us in the pre-implementation phase.
Okay. And we'll partner with law enforcement as well to make sure that the system is going to have all of the different capabilities to reduce our risk.
That's part of why we are looking for a pre-implementation vendor, is to help us develop the controls and the cyber against the cyber attacks and for whatever new system.
So we don't think that law enforcement is a natural partner in helping us look at that process either?
I'm sure they could be. Yeah.
I think they should be.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are facing this on a daily basis, and they're communicating with their colleagues across the country.
Right. We're looking to, as we said earlier, when it comes to cybersecurity, we're looking to broaden the partnerships and have that kind of dialogue.
Okay. And so there are a lot of payments to go out. I was also on Open Checkbook at the same time my colleague, Mr. Legislator McKevitt, was on. And so when I look at the volume that goes out, there's a lot. There's a lot of payments. And so I didn't have enough time to peruse it, but I would say any vendor that's getting multiple payments at a sum of $710,000 in a 1 month period, we should be hyper vigilant and making sure that we're looking at any changes to those types of accounts.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that
That's
any tax dollar that is not appropriately protected would be a shame on us, but I would think those that are going out at higher volumes and with higher risk, we should be definitely looking at those a lot closer.
Absolutely, that's one of the additional levels of control that, the vendors with higher payments, if they're making any changes to their accounts, need to be reviewed at a higher level within the claims division.
Good, very good. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Comptroller, again, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you to your team. Just also, if we can send out an email or any notification to our vendors where, where there's a lot of transactions, and asking them also to be part of the process, asking them that if taxpayer ID information on their part was somehow, leaked, to please notify us of that as well. Because that's something that was not under your control, how this perpetrator was able to secure and get that taxpayer ID information. So that's my only suggestion here, and I thank you for your presentation.
Appreciate it.
So before I'm going to turn it over to the non-committee members. Just before that, I have to say, and I'm sorry, and I apologize in advance, but I'm disappointed that you chose to put this into a press conference and the Comptroller's office took credit for stopping a fraud when the information that we've heard here today shows that it was nothing but pure dumb luck that we got this done. If the money would have gone in the hands of a more competent fraudster, this money would have been gone, and indeed it might still be continuing today if not for that. So we are going to really want to very closely see the new procedures and make a determination in this committee as to whether those are sufficient and as to whether we ought to recommend some further action. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Legislator Ford.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Chairman Coppell, giving me this opportunity to also ask questions. And I just want to start out with saying that Legislator Muscarella did bring up a good point. As we have seen with your office, that you have audited many departments and bringing out their inadequacies in regards to their safeguarding and, possible leaks or any faults that may lie with them, especially dealing with any of the money that we have, any money that is within Nassau County. It seems that according to your testimony here, that you brought up the fact that these phishing attempts and these cyber attack attempts, and I guess I'm like Legislator Muscarella and everyone else, I'm not really very proficient with software and IT and everything, but it seems that these attacks can happen, and they have been happening. And, so much so, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that you had indicated in April of 19, June 19, you brought, I guess, the people in your department in for training in regard to these type of IT safeguards or whatever else can be done because of the possibility of any type of attacks or any type of fraudulent activity that can occur. Am I correct?
What we had said is that in April and June of 19, cybersecurity was something that we brought up with our independent audit advisory committee, and it's something that we're working on in our office. Incidentally, both the majority and the minority in the legislature are represented on the committee. We had discussion with our independent auditors at that time about best practices and ways to protect the county going forward.
And these independent auditors, did they discuss then at that point that we can, all of a sudden, you could have somebody who may try to scam money out of the county? Did they talk about that then? Because it seems that, according to you, that we're all aware I think everybody, we're all aware, even on our personal accounts, we all know that anybody can access. I have to be very careful with my passwords. I have to be, concerned about whether or not somebody's going to steal a check or whatever, to take all these safeguards. People can sign up with LifeLock or, anything to protect their identity and also to protect any type of money that has been fraudulently taken from them. So, but that's my own thing. You as a controller, you're responsible for the safety of the county's money. So I just want to know that when you had this in April and June, when you had these discussions, knowing full well that this is something that can happen, and as we know now, it did happen, and thankfully the bank caught it. What did you indicate to the people that work for you to be aware of the fact that something like this can happen?
So as we said earlier, we increased the controls immediately in 2018. We continue to increase them in 2019. It's something that we've been working on throughout 2019, and now we've increased them going forward as well, and we have plans to continue to do so going forward.
But how did, when we look at this type of fraud that happened, how many people basically in your department were involved in this that were able to allow this account to get paid without anybody really checking? And did you ask, when I know that sometimes with contracts and any other type of submissions by anybody for payment for vouchers, it goes through 10 points of checks. Did you ask to see if whether or not those changes should have gone through other departments as well, to see if whether or not this was indeed a valid change?
Well, let me start by just explaining how the changes operate as a function of administration. The Comptroller Claims Division, we have two separate sections, one that handles the auditing of invoices and one that handles the vendor information. So I think that clears up a lot of misconception about how payments and the vendor information are intermingled. There is a wall in between the two. The vendor information, the way it operates is a purely manual system. Someone is entering this information into a computer. That one individual, now we have two individuals processing this information, also share other duties. Like the Deputy Controller said, we process about 1,500 changes. Some vendors have more than 30 different payment accounts. They're rather large. I would say, the controls have changed, and in the last 2 years, the controls have gotten much better than they were before. I will say that more vendors contact our office about legitimate payments that they don't know what they're for than asking if a payment went to a wrong account. So with that, I'm pretty confident that the controls we did have in place were good, and now they're better, given the limited system that we have to work with. We're basically fighting a war with sticks and rocks.
Okay, so then when you talk about, so you're saying that there's actually two separate departments. So in order for this vendor to have submitted this check, so the person who accepts the invoice and clears the invoice or the claim voucher, there's a wall between that person and the person actually making the payment?
So for each claim, there's not a new claim payment information. A vendor is set up with a profile so that they can get paid. That profile includes their various payment information, their bank account information for ACH, if they want to get a check, where that check was to go to. So the payments are made based upon the vendor profile. The payments get approved by the controller, go to the treasurers to pay. The treasurer pays based upon that vendor profile in the vendor system. The vendor profile is entered in this manual process that the fiscal officer explained, is entered by the hard workers of the claims division into the financial system.
All right, so with the vendor profile, okay, so I'm a vendor, and I say, I want my, this is my account, this is who I am, and whatever claims I have, you're going to send to my account at TD Bank, all right? So here I am, that's what you do, okay? So then all of a sudden, I decide, or somebody decides that it's going to be Denise Ford, but I said, not so much TD Bank anymore. I want it to go to Chase. So nobody checks to make sure that, why all of a sudden is she changing her bank? And knowing full well that we can be subjected to fraudulent activities on the part of anybody, just to get some money out of us.
So the vendor is required to submit the updated form, and now we vet that form with all the controls that we put in place since January 18 and the additional controls subsequent to this incident, including the phone calls, the dual verifications, and now, or in the near future, with the form being submitted to the vendor portal.
So then who did you call in regard to this bank? If you're saying that you had all these controls in place, that, ever since 2018, you have these controls in place. No, okay, I'm listening. I hear what you're saying. So you said that you have all this because, so if somebody's going to change a bank, you're going to do your due diligence because you're handling everything manually. And then all of a sudden now, somebody decides to change their bank. Who did you call to verify that that information was correct?
So the control in place at the time, the major control in place at the time, was the submittal of the void check. The Fisher mimicked that check. That's why we put the additional controls on, where one person from the vendor is asking for the change, and they were going to be contacting another person at the vendor, preferably the contact on the contract, to verify that they are in fact making the change and verifying all the banking information with the individual.
So who did you call?
I said the control in time at the time was the void check. We've had now the additional control of the phone call.
No, but you said before that since 2018 you had these checks and balances in place.
No, I said we've been developing them since 2018. We've had initial ones we put in place, the void check, checking the TINs, and we've layered on the additional controls. And post the incident, we layered on the additional controls of the phone calls and the additional verifications.
So then so what you're testifying today about is everything that you've changed since this scam happened. But we want to know, what did you do beforehand, knowing full well? I do have a problem with this.
So before we went from not verifying TIN numbers, not asking for a canceled check to verify the bank account number. We weren't doing any of that. We had decentralization where each department was verifying the information independently. So we centralized that all at our department. That was it's been a developing of additional controls since January of 2018.
Well, you didn't go far enough. That's really what I'm looking at. If this could happen, and if you're talking about trying to get an updated new security system, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. When I talk about just millions of dollars of taxpayer money. Now, you referenced that prior to 2018, it really was, whatever. So do we know offhand, or maybe when we go into executive session, maybe we can ask the police, how many scams occurred against the Comptroller's office prior to January 2018, and how many fraudulent payments? When you talked about, like, when the vendors call up and they say that now they can question whether or not it is a legitimate payment, what did you mean by that?
Well, we do get a number of inquiries into our office by vendors who have submitted claims for work performed or goods provided that do get paid on a timely basis.
It's a restriction of the financial system. So if you get paid by a check, depending on your banking institution, there may be a note on that check that tells you exactly what invoice is being paid or what isn't being paid. But there's a restriction. Our current financial system, our antiquated financial system, cannot, in the ACH payments, electronic payments, sort of tell the vendor exactly why they're getting that payment. The vendor needs to work with their own banking institution or inquire directly to us as to what that payment was for. So that's what Gabe was referring to, was they very often call up and say, hey, I got this check from you guys. I got this payment from you guys. What was that for? Could you correlate that back to the invoices that were in fact approved on a claim?
Is that still happening today?
It's a limitation in our financial system, yes.
So you're making no effort at this point, so that, like, because then you can make a payment to somebody's account, and if the person isn't going to be honest enough to say, if I got money in my account, like, there are people that they get money in their account and they say, wow, look at this, it's like Christmas in July and I can spend this money. How do you know that some of the payments you made were not made incorrectly?
The claims themselves, there are no fraudulent claims here. All the claims themselves are vetted and approved.
There was a fraudulent claim.
No, there
a
was
couple
not.
of them.
There was not a fraudulent claim. The claims that were approved were all valid claims. The payments that went out the door were all valid claims. It was the banking information that those payments went to that was defrauded. There was no fraudulent claims.
All right, so you sent $710,000 to an incorrect bank account, okay? Fraud, correct? So how do you know right now, when you make these payments to these bank accounts, okay, that it is an actual payment that this vendor was supposed to be paid?
Because we have the new controls in place, and we reviewed all of
But you
the-
said there's limitations. You have no way of telling them what invoice it's for, right? You just deposit it into their accounts. So people call up and they say, hey, I got this $600,000 payment from you. You know, can you tell me what it's for?
Right.
So
Before the payment goes out the door, we know exactly what the payment's for. We looked at all the backup and every invoice, all the backup before we make that payment, and approved that payment. We know what the payment was for.
like you did the $710,000.
Correct.
Okay. So you made a mistake there, and you could make another mistake. I'm just saying now, as you're moving forward,
That's why we have the additional controls in place.
what I'm saying, though, is that I think that you really should firm that up, you know, so when you make these payments into people's accounts, that there is a reason, and that you know clearly, and they know exactly what invoice to attribute that payment to, so they don't call you up and say, hey, you sent me some money, what are you paying me for? You know, because you can then very well send it to some account, and the people may say, might be a small mom and pop. Maybe the person's ready to leave Nassau County, and now they're going to go move to somewhere else, and all of a sudden they got a windfall of like saving $100,000, and you don't know that you paid them incorrectly, and they're all of a sudden out the door. They've got their plane tickets and they're gone, and you won't have the luck that you have with this bank, wherever it was, that told you that this account was an invalid account, and that thankfully we were able to recoup the money, and I thank the Nassau County Police Department for their due diligence. You know, I see, Comptroller, that there are people who took credit for saving us from this debacle, you know, in regard to the $710,000. So my ultimate question then would be in something like this, because it was a big breach, and it's very unsettling for all of us. Who's taking the blame?
I would say very simply, I don't think there's any credit to go around here. This was an attack, right? A phishing attack on the county. This is something that we were targeted as a county. Others are being targeted the same. And so from my perspective, it's not a question of credit or blame. It's a question of continually improving our controls with the humility, as I mentioned earlier, of understanding that as we continue to improve them, the scammers will continue to be more sophisticated. So this is an ongoing challenge for not just Nassau County, but for municipalities all over the country.
Now, you said, though, that you're also doing, you had recent instructions or training for, was this once again just with your cyber committee, or was this actually with the employees to go over safeguards and what they can do? Because obviously we don't have this new system in place, so that everybody has to be on their due diligence. Have you gone through with all of your employees training to let them understand what they need to do to make sure that this does not happen again?
As we said earlier, we have training within the Comptroller's office, and then there's been a broader training through the entire county by IT.
So what has your office done to train your people?
As we said, we did a training within the Comptroller's office. You can speak to the details there.
Yes, me as fiscal officer, it is my responsibility over the claims division. So we do on a periodic basis, and I would say every few weeks, discuss items like this in the news. For example, back in March, where Google and Facebook were victims of this similar scam and lost about $125 million. Also, Diesel Jeans, another example case study, Mattel. All these companies have also been victims, and we talk about that as a group.
Yeah.
We also look at opportunities to improve the system. We talk to each individual involved in the process and see what they need, what tools they need, what training they need to be better at what they do. So it is, as the Comptroller said, you know, it's always evolving, and we always have to continue training. It doesn't matter how much training we did in the past. We're going to continue to do as much training as we need in the future.
I think it better be done today, okay? Because I think that this is, it wasn't good news to recover this money. I think it's bad news all around that this even happened. Thank you.
think, is there anybody else? Oh, okay. Oh, perfect. We'll try and make it quick for your benefit, Legislator Ferretti. Comptroller Schnirman, I have a couple of concerns about the lack of notification, particularly to the Legislature, that this incident even occurred. I happen to find out through your press conference, almost 3 months after this incident apparently took place in October, and your press conference, I believe, was on January 10th. Obviously, as the institution that actually funds these accounts, and as an institution that's charged with the oversight of county government, including the Comptroller's office, I must admit that I'm concerned. You indicated that at some point in time, you notified the county executive, or at least the county executive's office. At some point in time, you notified someone within the treasurer's office. At no point in time did you notify anyone at the legislature. So can you please just walk me through the time frame of the timeline of who knew what when with regard to this incident, and why it was that you chose to keep the information quiet for whatever time you did?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we held a press conference with Commissioner Ryder. We were asked to not disclose information until that time, as it has and still is an active investigation. There were, as I had mentioned earlier, there were 3 to 4 other municipalities that were also targeted. We needed to recover the money before the scammers could be alerted to that and move the money themselves. So from that perspective, we had to wait to disclose to the public until that time. I will mention...
I apologize for interrupting. I'm not suggesting that you needed to notify the public. What I'm suggesting is that you need to notify your other partners in government that there's a situation.
We were immediately in touch with the police department.
Did the police department tell you not to notify the legislature?
The police department asked us to not do notification, and I will just leave it there.
To whom? To anyone?
We were asked not to speak about the incident.
So if we were asked, if I were to ask the police department, a representative from the police department, whether the instructions to the Comptroller's office included not notifying the county legislature?
I'll leave it there for now.
Is there... Okay. Who within the police department gave you the notification?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Who within the police... You indicated that someone within the Nassau County Police Department gave you the instruction not to notify the county legislature. Who was it?
So our conversations with the police department were obviously between myself and the commissioner, and Deputy Comptroller spoke to the team as well.
So it's your...
There was concerns to protect the integrity in the investigation as to not disclose the information to as little amount of individuals as possible, because the money moves fast and because there was a need to recover the money before it went anywhere else. That was what was conveyed to us.
Was a specific instruction given to you by the Nassau County Police Department not to notify the county legislature of this incident?
I don't know that the legislature was discussed as part of that operational, in terms of operations.
Okay, who did the police department tell you was important enough for you to be able to inform?
I think I mean, you could talk to them about their investigative techniques, but I believe it's...
No, I'm not asking about techniques. I'm asking about
specific...
No, you're telling me that you received specific instructions from the Nassau County Police Department not to disclose information. I understand not to disclose information publicly. I'm asking you, what specific instructions did you receive not to disclose information to your other partners in government, not publicly. You want to talk to us now in executive session, same conversation could have been had in executive session. Same conversation could have been had privately. I want to know, did you receive a specific instruction whether and when you were permitted to notify the county executive, whether and when you were permitted to notify the county treasurer, and whether and when you were permitted to notify the county legislature, and who gave you that instruction?
There were no specific instructions. There was a general instruction to limit the amount of individuals who were aware of the information so that we could catch the perpetrators.
So it was not the Nassau County Police Department that gave you that instruction?
Yes.
It was the Comptroller's office that made the decision that you couldn't notify the county legislature.
As the controller said, the county legislature did not specifically enter into that conversation.
And when was the county executive's office notified?
As soon as we were informed of the fraudulent account and identified the additional payments.
Okay. And that would have been once you got a telephone call from the bank?
Once we were notified from the bank.
And did that the notification came through a telephone call, didn't it?
It came from an electronic communication.
Email?
Yes.
So you received the email, the county executive's office got notified right away. Who within the county executive's office did you notify?
I think we're not going to speak to the details of who talked to who, when, and how, and what.
Why?
Outside of executive session, we're not going to get into the details of how the incident was handled in that sense.
How can disclosure of that information jeopardize any investigation?
At this moment, I would like to make a motion for this to be an executive session. Clearly, a skilled defense attorney for these perpetrators can use this information, and that would affect an investigation. So at this moment, I would like to make an application for executive session.
I don't think we're worried about protecting the defendant or the perpetrator over here, and I don't think that's what the questions were directed to. Mr. Rhodes.
Really, this relates to senior staff performance, and this also relates to attorney consultation. For those reasons, I'm making a request for executive session.
Want to do it?
Well,
Okay.
Well,
all right. We have a motion. We have a second.
Well, maybe we need the police. They're coming in with executive session. Okay.
I can move on with other questions.
Why don't we do that? Let him move on, and then you'll make your motion again, or somebody will make a motion again, and then we'll do it.
So who was notified and when is an executive session? Now, I just want to clarify, and a couple of my colleagues here have gone into it. The Newsday article from your press conference indicates, quote, Nassau County Comptroller Jack Schnirman said controls in place at the Comptroller's office immediately identified the fraudulent activity, leading the funds to be frozen. He said the additional security controls had been added. That additional security controls had been added since the attack. That isn't accurate, as we now know. Correct?
Once we were notified by the bank that there were monies going into the fraudulent account, we were able to immediately identify the $710,000 based, and we immediately took action and started the investigation.
But the suggestion that there was some sort of internal control in place at the Comptroller's office that actually discovered this would be inaccurate.
We were able to identify the $710,000 and as effectively and as fast as we were based upon the records that we maintained in our office.
All right. So
and those are part of our controls, is to have those records so we could get the money back as quickly as possible.
Were it not for the fact that somebody at the bank not an employee of Nassau County, not an employee of the Comptroller's office, were it not for somebody on the ball at the bank who picked up on this, you would have had absolutely no idea that this even happened. Perhaps until the vendor called up and said, "Where's my check?" Is that accurate?
It's perspective, yes. Yes.
I'll just answer as the Deputy Comptroller had said earlier, that is a part of our controls.
So part of your controls is relying upon some third party happen to catch it. Is that's what your control is?
And that's your characterization of it. However,
But that's what happened, right?
a major piece, obviously, of anyone's controls is working with the financial institutions.
Just out of curiosity, since that's apparently one of our controls, according to Open Checkbook, and this is, by the way, isn't something that happened just once, right? I think we've established in the testimony today that there were multiple submissions adding up to the 710,000. Was that correct?
No. Again, it's one vendor profile that got fished and modified.
Right, but there were multiple
Payments that went to that vendor profile, yes.
multiple payments that
They were
went to
all legitimate claims. There were no fraudulent claims. All the claims were legitimate claims, reviewed and approved by the Comptroller's
But
office.
the payments, how many payments went to the wrong destination?
There were multiple payments comprising the $710,000.
Okay. So how many payments went through before the bank caught this?
That's the level of detail we'd like to give you in executive session.
Well, I'm just curious at how many things got past us before somebody outside the county happened to pick it up.
There were multiple payments. Not many, but multiple. And all within a less than 30-day period.
Was it more or less than 5?
Less than 10.
All right. The updated controls that you've put in place. Now, you're telling us you can't discuss those updated controls unless we're in executive session.
We've discussed a number of them, so if you have...
We discussed, we went into quite a bit of detail on them already.
On certain of them. Is that an exhaustive list of the updated controls that you put in place?
I don't recall all of them that were mentioned during the proceeding today, but it's pretty exhaustive, I would say, or nearly there.
And we've discussed Open Checkbook and the information that is part of some of these controls you're now requiring. And in this particular instance, you indicated that the scammer completed the form with the correct tax identification number, 10, the correct vendor name, the correct vendor contact name, the correct vendor address, and the correct vendor phone number, right?
And submitted the modified fraudulent check.
Okay, and a copy of the check. The information that's contained here as your check against that is information that can be publicly obtained probably within about 20 minutes. What other controls are you putting in place, or checks are you putting in place to safeguard against this?
Right, so as discussed, we do the dual check. Right, there's one individual or an individual at the vendor who will request the change, and then our department will reach out to a separate individual within the vendors at the vendor, preferably the contact person on the contract, to verify that those changes are being made and to verify all of the information on the form.
And if it was simple enough for this particular fraudster, I guess we're calling him, to be able to game the system, how do you have any confidence that the 120,738 checks that were issued to vendors, that the same thing didn't happen multiple times? That the bank didn't happen to tell us about?
Or the vendor not telling us they didn't receive payment, right? So we haven't.
What safeguards do we have that hasn't occurred?
I think we've been
We've been through that. We have the additional controls we put in place. We reviewed all of the forms that were submitted for a 6-month period prior to the incident, and verified that all that information was accurate for all the active vendors.
All right. Well, I guess we'll get the rest of the answers in executive session.
All right. Well, okay. Well, why don't we? Oh, Mr. Ferretti.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I want to get some dates down. Number one, when were you first? What date were you first notified of this incident?
As indicated, we will give specifics like that in executive session.
What was the?
I was just asking what date they were notified of the incident.
Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Have you been making notes of these questions, of these important questions that you didn't want to answer? Yes?
That didn't want to answer, but felt it was necessary to answer in executive session. Yes.
I understood. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Forgive me.
Yes.
Correct. You are absolutely correct. You've been making notes. Do we have your undertaking to supply those answers in a confidential note to the committee?
Sure.
Okay. When?
As soon as we can put them together.
A day, a week, a year?
Within a week.
Okay. Fair enough.
Can you tell us if you first discovered this before or after the budget was passed by this body? The county budget.
A particular year?
The 2020 budget that we passed in October of 2019.
I don't recall the date that the budget was passed. So.
October 28th, 2019.
I think the answer will be in the executive, in the memo that we provide to you.
Do you recall informing Newsday, anyone from your office, that you called the police about this issue on October 25th, 2019? In a press release?
I believe the police commissioner may have informed of that, but that date sounds right.
Right, in terms of what? When you called the police? Somebody from your office called the police?
Correct.
Okay. Now, we know you contacted the county executive at some point after discovering this, correct? County executive's office?
Correct.
Okay. Was that before or after you contacted the police?
I think basically simultaneously, but
What does that mean, simultaneously? You had two phones going?
no, I think that's the level of detail we're going to speak to today.
Will you include that information in your memo to us?
Sure.
Can you explain what a cyber attack is?
I think we spoke to it earlier as we began, that there are multiple kinds of cyber attacks, and we were clear about in this instance that this was a phishing attack rather than an overall attack on the county's IT infrastructure.
So then you would say a phishing attack is a type of cyber attack? Would that be fair?
We've mentioned that several times, yes.
I understand. I might ask some questions that you've already answered. I apologize for that. It's been a couple hours. My understanding of what a phishing expedition is a fraudulent email or communication that draws information from the municipality in this case. Would you agree with that?
And that's fundamentally what happened here. There was a fraudulent email, the mimicked email that drew the information from the municipality, correct?
And what information did it draw? I mean, you didn't give them a credit card number. You didn't give them a social security number. What information did it draw?
Essentially, they requested and received a vendor information form, which is publicly available on our website.
Okay. So then in what way is this a phishing expedition?
The form was completed and submitted using the Fisher's mimicked email account.
Right, right. But they got information from you that's public information, correct?
Somewhat semantics, but
No, I don't think it is. I mean, you know, you had a press conference on January 11th indicating that somehow you uncovered a phishing expedition and a cyber attack. And I'm trying to determine if there was really even a phishing expedition at all, or whether you just sent money to the wrong bank account.
the information was submitted using the mimicked email account. The initial information from that mimicked email account was a phishing. They were asking to receive, they asked the fiscal officer to send the information, the form, which was then completed and sent back to us using that mimicked email account.
Well, let's ask,
with the phishing incident.
you indicated they asked the fiscal officer. Was the initial email to the fiscal officer?
The initial email was to a general email account at the Comptroller's office, which was forwarded to the fiscal officer.
And was that email addressed to the fiscal officer?
It was to a general email account.
I know who you're saying it was sent to a general email account, but did it indicate
It's the
who
level
was
of
it?
detail that we'll provide in our report.
Okay. Well, I could tell you, I have a copy of it. So what I could tell you is, if my 7-year-old son got an email like this, he wouldn't have responded to it. So it's very hard to believe that your office did. But can you tell me? Again, I'm sorry. Was there? When you received the email, are there any dual controls in place?
I'm sorry, excuse me, legislator. You just said you had a copy of which now?
Mr. Freddie, you have a copy of that email?
Yes.
Oh, can you give it to someone for?
Sure, I'll pass it around.
Can I ask how and why you have a copy of that email?
It was given to me a few minutes ago.
By whom?
Oh, I get to ask the questions, Comptroller, respectfully.
I
I'll
appreciate that, but
I'll send you a memo when I get the information.
I get to be concerned about the security here, and that's a concern.
Whose security?
Security of an email that was sent to your general email address?
I mean, we're talking about internal emails that are the subject of investigation, so that is a concern if they're being forwarded around, yes.
Well, I think that we should be concerned about what happened a little bit more than how I'm trying to get to the bottom of why it happened.
Well, I think we can agree that we should be concerned about what happened, and I think we are concerned about what happened. And there's a point where the concern about what happened butts up against...
I think we're running in circles here, and I think this is another illustration of the fact that if you think that this shouldn't be out there, well, then the fact that it is out there is not a great thing.
I think we should move on.
And maybe not a great thing from your office. I don't know.
Were there dual controls in place when emails such as these came in?
I'm not sure we understand the question.
Sure. When this, as you described it, phishing email came in, prior to the change being made to the bank account information, were there more than one set of eyes that reviewed this request?
Yes.
Okay. And who from your office, what title, if you're not going to give me a name, reviewed the request?
The initial email was sent to that general mailbox. It was then forwarded to me by the Director of Accounting. I then had possession of it, and once the information was provided, submitted that to a supervisor over that unit, who then forwarded it on to a person to process it.
Okay. Now, and I apologize if this was already asked, it may have been, but was there any kind of contact, whether by telephone or any other means, with the vendor prior to making the change to confirm that they're requesting this change?
At the time, the major control in place was the submittal of a void check, which was fraudulently submitted. That's the additional controls we put in place to make that contact.
Okay, so is that a no? There was no communication with the vendor to confirm that they were requesting this change?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you say there was a void check that was sent to the Comptroller's office, was that void check from the old account or the account that they were looking to change to?
Change to.
So how does that safeguard anything?
That's why we put additional controls in place that we've discussed.
So it doesn't. Getting a check from the new account does nothing, correct?
It enables us to verify that it is in fact a bank account, a true bank account.
Well, that's great. But how does that in any way, I mean, you included it on your packet and your slideshow, how in that in any way safeguard this from happening? Getting a copy of the check. You didn't contact the vendor to confirm they wanted this change. You got a check that we now know is for the new account, which is useless. So in what way did this check, or I guess I just said it was useless, would you agree? Did this check safeguard, have it act as a safeguard in any way whatsoever?
It did, and I'll explain that.
Please.
When that control was initiated, the Comptroller's office was made aware in 3 separate instances, 3 separate vendors. What it does is it ensures that the vendor doesn't make any mistakes in providing their own bank account information and verifies that the numbers provided to us are correct and accurate.
You lost me. So are you saying you verified the new account number that they wanted with the check? The check to confirm that there was no error, like typo in the numbers? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so you verified, to be clear, you verified the new account that requested with a check to make sure that they didn't improperly enter the new account number.
And the information on the check matched the vendor information.
Okay, but that doesn't stop or provide a level of security to prevent what happened here, correct? That just prevents an incorrect account number on the new account.
Prevent a sophisticated individual from mimicking a bank check with the correct address and a correct account number? No.
You indicated that you've already met with the IT department, is that correct?
No.
Oh, I thought you said in the beginning that you've already met with them in terms of new training procedures and...
They've instituted new training procedures as well as we have.
Has your office contacted IT since October 25th, 2019, with regard to training Comptroller employees?
We've been doing in the internal training, and on top of that, the IT department has done training for all county employees on how to identify phishing. And we're working with the IT department to have the 700 form or the vendor information form submitted through the vendor portal.
And just to be clear, the new procedures and policies that you put in place after this attack, you're not willing to share them right now to the public, is that correct?
No, I think we have.
All of them?
I believe so.
I think we shared the general thrust of them in some significant level of detail to the extent that we could. And we also detailed additional levels of control that are forthcoming.
How can you ensure that this hasn't happened before? Well, strike. Let me ask you again. Are you aware of this ever happening before in Nassau County? Has the Nassau County Comptroller's office ever been subject of a scam such as this?
During my time, I'm not aware.
I'm not asking during your time. Are you aware of any time the Nassau County Comptroller's office ever being subject to a scam such as this?
Broadly speaking, no.
Okay, how about any of the other 62 counties in New York State?
Go ahead. I'm not in a position to answer comprehensively from New York State, but as we spoke about earlier in the presentation, we're seeing attacks proliferate. In fact, in this particular attack alone, there were 3 to 4 municipalities targeted, some of which on Long Island.
Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. So I'm not asking you to answer for all New York State. I know what I'm asking is, are you aware of any other counties who have been attacked in a similar way? If the answer is you're not aware of it, that's fine. I'm just asking if any of the 3 of you are aware.
We're aware that in this instance, there were other counties attacked in a similar manner.
What counties?
That's not a level of detail we will provide in public.
I believe the police commissioner, hang on a moment. I believe it was disclosed that there was a municipality within Suffolk County that was attacked.
Okay, so it wasn't the county then? Suffolk County, it's a local municipality within Suffolk County?
I believe that is the case. In addition, this morning I'm aware that the county itself disclosed that it was attacked. Not in this particular incident, in a separate incident.
Did your office ever contact NIFA with regard to this attack prior to the press conference that you had on January 11th?
I don't believe so, but I will double check.
So there's a chance you contacted NIFA with regard to this attack? You can't tell me affirmatively that you did not?
I don't believe that we did, but I will double check.
Well, okay. Did your office contact anyone outside of Nassau County government about this attack prior to January 11th?
Other than the bank that would have been involved, there would have been no one.
Well, they contacted you, right?
That I could recall. But when you're saying contact, so you're talking about general contacts?
Yeah, contact. You didn't tell us. Did you tell anyone else?
Contact regarding the incident, so we would have had to talk to the bank about the incident. That's a contact.
Okay. Other than the bank, anyone outside of Nassau County government, did you contact them about this incident prior to January 11th?
I don't believe so.
Again, you can't say affirmatively you did not.
We may have asked some information from the vendor, but I don't recall.
I just want to be clear here because I think this is important. You cannot say whether or not, on 100% certainty, I'm asking you, Comptroller, whether your office, somebody from your office, or you personally contacted NIFA and informed them of this, the Fiscal Control Board of this county. You're being the fiscal watchdog. You can't tell me if you contacted NIFA and informed them prior to them approving our budget whether this incident occurred.
No, I cannot say that definitively. We contacted NIFA, and if you'd like to delineate what you see as a tie-in between this and the budget, I'd be interested in understanding where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, when we passed the budget, and possibly when NIFA approved the budget, we don't know because you don't know, if you told them, we were not aware of this possible deficiency shortfall in our budget. You don't see that as a problem?
I think you are making a link between payments and budget that is incorrect.
So if this money was not recovered, does the vendor get paid?
I'll let you.
Fortunately, that's not a road we had to go down.
And we could thank the bank for that. But the question is, if the money wasn't recovered, would the vendor have gotten paid?
The vendor would have had a valid claim against the county, and the money would have been due and owing.
Right. And who pays that? It's taxpayer money, correct? Yes?
Correct.
Right. So we voted on a budget where there was this money in limbo, where you did not know if we were going to recover it, and we were not informed of that prior to voting. And we also didn't know the amount at that time, if I'm following this correctly. We didn't know it was limited to $710,000.
I'm sorry, I'm not following that this is relevant to the budget of 2020. First of all, this is a 2019 financial issue. So I think you're conflating the two things, and I don't think that they actually go together.
Well, maybe I'm mistaken, but if there's a shortfall in the 2019 budget, wouldn't it come out of the 2020 budget?
If there was a shortfall in the 2019 budget, it would be dealt with from a fund balance perspective, which that's an entirely different discussion altogether. But it would not necessarily impact the 2020 budget.
Doesn't the fund balance go into the budget?
The overall fund balance of the county, I don't believe that it would impact the budget. But bottom line, I don't see that these two issues.
Maybe this was a discussion we could have had.
I don't see that these two issues are related.
Okay. When the budget was passed, do you know what the exposure was? On October 28th, did you know what the exposure was to the 2019 or 20 budget?
I believe at that point the funds were frozen.
Okay,
The majority of the money at that point would have been recovered.
But can you confirm that was we're talking about a 3-day period here, right? I mean, you notified the police on October 25th. We passed the budget on October 28th. Are you telling me in those 3 days, which, by the way, I think 2 of them were a weekend, but I'm not sure about that you were able to confirm with 100% certainty that the exposure was limited to $710,000?
Yes.
Okay. From just this incident, or did you do an audit where you went back and determined if anything else happened for the other vendors?
We confirmed the 6 months worth of vendor information forms to make sure they were correct.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
To the chair, a point of order. Legislator already presented this email that I learned off the record that it was obtained from the police department. I'd just like to know when and where did you receive that documentation?
Oh. I'm sorry. You're asking him.
Legislator already mentioned that he received a copy of the actual email that was used in this.
Well, you saw it as well,
I would like to know how that document.
And I will answer you, counsel.
Our counsel didn't receive a copy of it.
You want to let me finish my sentence, or would you rather just keep on making speeches? Okay.
I'm asking questions.
All right. Now, counsel requested that the police department show it to him. Police department agreed to show it to him on a confidential basis. He exhibited.
How do you put it on the record?
No, there's no. We can show it to anyone. All right, it was not provided on a confidential basis. It was provided to us, and we just showed it to you too. There's nothing nefarious, nothing hidden. We just saw it for the first time, and we showed it to you for the first time. None of the members of the committee saw it before now. We just saw it for the first time, and so did you. There's nothing scary about this.
Was this the first time that Mr. Ferretti saw it?
Well, Mr. Ferretti, is it the first time you saw
Absolutely.
it? Yeah. Yeah, just everybody sitting here saw it for the first time. I just saw it for the first time.
Can we receive an official copy? Can our counsel receive an official copy?
If the PD allows it, it's fine with us. Then you know we'll ask. The police are going to be out here, and we'll ask them for it. Because we asked for it and you didn't. It's not that
If this is a
complicated.
public hearing, why wouldn't both sides have it?
Because we asked for it and got it, and you didn't. And when we got it, we looked at it and showed it to you too. It's really not complicated here. And you want to make something out of nothing, you can keep on trying. All right. And by the way, I just would make one point as to what that did show. There was a real red flag on that email, and I'm not going to go into depth on it, but this is a very simple thing. On the signature, the from of the scammer showed that it came from xcorp.org, and right down at the bottom, it showed the www of that same company, that same corp.com, which showed that they had a .com, and though that conflict, that's a real red flag. Okay, but it was missed. In any event, Ms. Walker.
I just have one quick question. Not who you told when or whatever, but don't you think before you had a press conference with Newsday, it would have been nice for the legislators? Shouldn't even use the word nice. Should be something that this body should know about before we read it in Newsday? I mean, I just think that would be proper protocol. You are the Nassau County Comptroller, and you don't feel that's important to share with the legislature? And we see it in a newspaper?
We shared it all at once, and I appreciate your request, and that's something that we will certainly take into consideration going forward.
Could I ask you, did you know before you saw it in Newsday? Did any of you know before you saw it in Newsday?
I would just say that there are lots of things in this county that we don't hear about before we see a Newsday that I've found in the past. It's not just this one time. It's several items that we don't get informed about before we read.
Right. And I mean, I agree. There's many things we see, and it doesn't make me happy. I just think this is extremely important, and for us to find out by seeing it in Newsday, I have a big problem with that. And I've stated before if I've had a problem with it, so I'm stating it publicly here that I have a major problem with that. And so you knew nothing either before you saw it in Newsday?
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. We have some Advil available if you'd like on the way out, but otherwise, you're free.
Thank you.
You know what, but I would ask you not to leave the room, actually, because I'm told that there may be some further questions that may develop. So if you would just hang out, that would be preferable. We have one more witness, I believe, from IT. That would be Nancy Stanton. And I guess you'll just state your name and position for the record.
Nancy Stanton.
You got that already? No. Okay, go ahead.
Say your name.
Al Perez, Deputy Commissioner. Steve Barry, Manager, Computer Operations.
Now, do you have a statement to make?
I do.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Nancy Stanton, IT Commissioner. We would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak here today to discuss efforts that my department have put in place to harden our infrastructure. I have brought with me today senior staff Al Perez and Steve Barry. Let me first begin by letting you know that the Department of Information Technology takes cybersecurity very seriously. The infrastructure, network systems, and house data we store and maintain in the county are the cornerstone to the operation of many departments and constituents. Because of this, it is one of the most, if not the highest priority in my department. My department is committed to reduce security risks by eliminating potential attacks throughout the county. During 2018 and 2019, through a grant, we were fortunate and pleased to work with the Department of Homeland Security for a cybersecurity evaluation. The purpose of this cooperative exercise was to assess any possible vulnerabilities that we have had in our systems. This analysis produced a report of vulnerabilities and recommendations to harden our environments and systems. As of today, I am pleased to say that with the support of my staff, all critical recommendations have been remediated. In addition to meeting weekly to discuss security measures and weekly activity, we have done many things. Some you can see, some you cannot. Here are a few examples of what you can see. Actively migrating from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Acquired and deployed user-employee security training. Implemented multi-factor authentication across a number of departments, soon to be countywide. Implemented a complex password policy. Locked down the use of personal email access. Limited web access through web filters. Here are a few things you cannot see. Implemented stronger application update deployments, browser Windows versions. Adopted a more aggressive security update practice with Windows and MS Office security updates. Acquired and deployed countywide AI-driven security suite and maintained version deployments. Overhauled completely the way Nassau County performs backups. Full server machine backups using the latest version, and all available backup agents automatically are in place. Server OS security patching is currently being implemented. Our firewalls now have deep SSL scanning enabled for network vulnerabilities. In June of 2019, there was a local law, 229-19, enacted through this legislative body to provide the following, which I will now give an update. Employee training. This is underway. We expect to be complete by the end of January. Going forward, we will be doing this training on a semi-annual basis. Also to note, we have conducted many cybersecurity seminars to constituents throughout the county. We will also begin a program where these seminars are offered to employees. Number 2, submit an annual cybersecurity risk assessment and response analysis. This is in progress. We have engaged a vendor to assist with penetration testing and reporting. Once a report is complete, it will be forwarded accordingly. 3, establish a panel of security service and incident response providers to assist.
Ms. Stanton, forgive me. We all appreciate all these things, but
okay.
Do you think you might be able to confine your remarks to the implementation of various controls at the that would apply to the controller rather than as a countywide? In other words, it's very important what you're doing, and I don't mean to denigrate that at all. But this hearing is
okay.
pretty narrowly focused, and so if you have any light that you can shed on the recent event that we've been discussing, I assume you've been here, A, and B, as to what you may have implemented or would like to suggest to implement in order to prevent a recurrence, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are working with the Comptroller's office as far as registering vendors, providing passwords so that they can only get in. We are working with them on the 700 form, which they mentioned, to be online, and in order to access that, you would have to have a password. Employee training we're already doing. You guys mentioned encryption. We would be happy to work with them on that. We have
So
that available.
you haven't done that. You haven't had any requests for that.
We have several departments or agencies using it very minimally, but we certainly should be.
But there's not been any request yet from the Comptroller specifically for that.
No.
And is that something that you consider important?
Yes.
For them?
Yes,
Okay.
for them, yes.
All right. Yeah, go on, please. I'm sorry.
That's really it. We were not involved in the recent event.
So you have no ideas of okay, good. Now, can you give us any good ideas as to what you think ought to be implemented based upon what you've heard here today, beyond whatever we might have suggested?
Yeah, we can talk with them with whatever they need, and we'd certainly help them implement whatever they need.
Multi-factor authentication is going to them regardless.
They have that already.
Right.
That's in place. It is being rolled out throughout the county. Training is
the encryption, obviously. Now, is there a VPN in place for their transactions?
No, there's no VPN in place for their transaction.
And would you not suggest that there ought to be?
So, in what way would you think that?
Well, I guess that that's just an additional layer of protection against somebody hacking into observing emails that are going in and out.
So the VPN would be for if there were transactions coming in and out of the county, not for emails. It would be if somebody was connecting.
VPN would not
alleviate this issue. No.
Emails would not travel through the VPN?
No.
If you had a VPN?
No. So our email system in Nassau County is in Microsoft Office 365.
Yes.
So anything in and out of the county is coming over our internet connection.
Which is adequately protected in and of itself. Therefore,
Absolutely.
The VPN, okay, that's protected from snooping. Got it.
Like Mr. Schnirman said, it was a phishing attempt on the Comptroller's office. So last week we actively blocked 1,100 phishing attempts into the county.
Can you block? Can you set things up at the Comptroller's office if necessary, so that nothing is done from a remote computer?
So that nothing is done.
No financial transactions can be implemented through a remote computer.
So if financial transactions if they're coming from outside the county, they can only come through a VPN or a secure connection.
Well, I'm talking about in other words, let's say I'm just imagining this, and there's no suggestion that this has actually occurred, just to be clear. But should a county employee decide to work from home, let's say, and process payments by coming in through the county systems,
They'll be coming in through a VPN.
they'll be
system.
coming in through a VPN.
Correct.
So therefore, that would be safe.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anybody? Nobody. Thank you. All right. Now we're done with our witnesses, and if there are any members of the public that would like to comment, you're welcome to let yourselves be known now. Anybody? Can't hear. Oh, we have a winner here, right? You would like to make a public comment? Well, why don't you just come right up, please? At that desk over there, at the other side of it, and there's push the red button and.
Okay. My name is Eileen Hessian, and I come from Long Beach. I am really up here just to say thank you very much for having this hearing. I come from Long Beach, where we are in deep financial trouble. It was stated that this was an attempted scam, but it was actually a successful scam, and I want to thank the bank who discovered and reported it. Otherwise, we'd be out $700,000. In Long Beach, we had few financial things in place that took care of our finances. We were fed much misinformation regarding the city's finances, no checks, no balances, inadequate safeguards, and incompetence. Long Beach taxes have risen substantially. No one has ever taken responsibility for it, and no one has ever said the buck stops here. I want to sincerely thank you, the legislator, for holding this hearing transparently and looking to strengthen all controls and procedures. Thank you to the bank, and thank you again to the legislature.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to take a motion to adjourn by Ms. Birnbaum, seconded by Ms. Walker. All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.